Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 257. I'm Steve Smith, although I've been called a lot worse. And at the table we have...
Kostas, or my full name, Constantinos Alevizopoulos.
He's going to speak to us in Greek tonight, and that's Greek to me. And on the phone is the guy from Dallas, Texas, by way of Minot, North Dakota. Got Davey Anderson and Davey Crockett. How are you doing, Davey Anderson?
Perfect. Hey, yeah, having a great summer. A lot of good stuff. Enjoying the typical fortnight
Wimbledon
at this time of year. Yeah, really enjoying it.
You have to have respect the players working in Dallas. It's a little warm, hot, and humid. That builds character, for sure.
Yeah, I like the extremes, though. A lot of heat, and then cold enough in the winter to make people appreciate a 70-degree day. I think if you have perfection every day in front of you with the weather, I don't think it's good for your character.
Here's a weather story for you. So my son Connor, he's at Ohio State, and they're playing away at Minnesota. And they're warming up indoors, and Ty Tucker, the legend, says, "Hey, Smith, put your warm-up on." And Connor says, No, I'm good. And Tucker turns the volume up and goes, "We're playing outside." And Connor just said, "No way." And, the rule is, unless it's changed, the home coach, if it's 50 degrees, and I don't think they take the wind chill into consideration. So the Minnesota coach wanted to play outside, just any chance to upset the big dog. But coming from Florida, in some ways you're a fair weather player, but not if you can stick the summers. We had a gal up here, a great kid, one of the nicest people ever. Claire, she trains at your place some, trains with Jeff Lewis some. She's from Houston. I don't know of any place that's the weather is more demanding than the summer heat and humidity of Houston.
Yeah, it's brutal there.
Well, let's talk about Wimbledon. A little Wimbledon chat like last time. We're in the second week. It's actually tomorrow are the semis and the singles. Let's go around the horn. Tell us it doesn't have to be your favorite player, but what's one player comes to your mind, Wimbledon player? Let's go with Kostas. What do you got?
You mean that plays now in the...
Yeah, playing now, current. You could say...
Someone who's
favorite player, someone's like you're curious, love watching he or she play.
It's a tough one.
You can think about it for a minute. Dave, how about you? We'll come back to you.
Yeah, this Wimbledon, I've really been excited, and I love to watch because of the things he stands for in terms of perseverance. Is Marin Cilic. I think it's been a great story to, help kids understand that the flavor of the month stuff is nice, but a guy like Cilic who, turned pro in 2005, and multiple, he's been in the final stages of slams. He, as we know, he's walked away with it, but it's just, I think he's a great story of perseverance. Incredible work ethic. And, he reminds me a little bit of Delpo sometimes, the way the ball comes off his racket. And I really have enjoyed, seeing him do so well this fortnight.
No, that's especially what happened to him when he was in the Wimbledon final. Remember, he got injured. He couldn't finish the match. One story leads to another story, but when you mentioned Cilic, this is for listeners, and this is certainly of value, is the Fed was asked about Cilic, and his answer was before or after he changed his serve. Because he did change the toss and started serving bigger. I one time was helping a young Austin Krajicek, and it was at Indian Wells, and it was with Raven Klaassen. I remember Raven had an off day. Austin was playing singles. He was out of the qualies. And we had lunch and dinner. It's a great place to hang out, Indian Wells. It's like a tennis festival. And Ivanisevic and Silic, they were hitting balls. Before we went in for lunch, we came out, walked around, and they were still hitting balls when we had dinner. They just hit, and hit. Bob Brett, who learned from the late Bob Brett, who was a disciple of Harry Hopman's. That's, lower your toss and have a hard work ethic. That's a great work ethic, I should say. Who do you have, Coach?
So being from Greece, I'm going to go for another person from the Balkans. Coach Dave, you chose someone from Croatia, which is also from the Balkans. I'm going to go for Grigor Dimitrov. I just think someone kind of who's at the moment kind of a veteran on the tour. I actually heard a really cool story about him. I did a PTR course a couple of years ago in Wheaton, Illinois. And they say he went to play the Laver Cup in Chicago, and some of the coaches that were there said that they spotted him by himself in downtown Chicago, by himself, and they said that if you didn't know him from tennis, you would have no idea that he was a celebrity. He was just by himself, kind of minding his own business. I don't know, it just kind of gave me the idea that he's a down-to-earth guy. He said just didn't want anyone to bother him, just was enjoying himself. I don't know, it seems like a good sport, and I feel bad for him after what happened against Sinner. So.
Well, the time when he was dating Maria Sharapova, she bought him a light blue Porsche. I did feel bad about him when I heard that story. But Dimitrov, he's a Ferrari. I always think of Dimitrov, 7 different coaches, first 7 years. But perseverance, and it's so sad, to be up 2 sets to love against Sinner and to be injured. It's fun to watch him play because he certainly can play all court tennis. I tell players very often, I said, you're just an offensive baseliner. We could call you a counter attacker, but if you don't go to the net, you don't go to the net. Of course, they've called him baby fed. I remember Frankie Danzovic from Canada. He was at one time called the poor man's fed because the one-handed backhand and be able to come forward and having variety. But the gal from Taiwan, let me tell you who I've got written down here. With Hei Su Wei, am I saying that right? From Taiwan, the doubles player.
Tough name.
Yeah. Shay.
With it's amazing. 39 years old, $12 million. All these years coached by Paul McNamee. McNamee tells a story that she said, "Hey, coach, I broke the strings of my racket. What do I do?" Because she never breaks strings in her racket, according to the story. With 9 doubles titles, 4 at Wimbledon, 2 mixed, so 11 majors, was 23 in the world of singles. Number 1 in doubles, top 10 8 times. She's 2 hands on both sides. She's so crafty. She's done so her style obviously is very unorthodox. But we help people hit the ball very well as far as working on stroke production. I'm always telling them that stroke production is a bonus. Being able to compete in character, but that's she's still in. She's playing with Ostapenko from Latvia. But yeah, there's just so many great stories that always come out of all the majors. It comes into your living room for 2 weeks in a row. Okay, Dave, your turn. We'll go around turns here. What do you got? Any comments on Wimbledon?
Well, I had wrote down that exact name that you just mentioned. I think she's so clever and so calm. I mean, that's what I think of when I see her. And then I just took a little dive into the men's doubles, and in the semifinals of the 8 players still remaining, there's only 2 in their 20s, Hijikata and then Cash. Cash at 28, Hichikata at 24. And the other teams, going all the way up to Zabalas and Granollers at 39 and 40 years old, or 40 and 39. So I think, what we try to tell people is, whether they're that age, 38, 39 years old, and they were fortunate enough to go on after college and maybe make it onto the tour, or maybe they are playing stuff similar to what Dave Severson has played his whole life, the USTA Nationals and then the ITS. But it's just a lifelong journey. I mean, somebody was at the tournament, in the young age groups. Clay courts are going on in the U.S. right now, and I said, "Hey, great job! You made it to an L1. That was a primary goal." I said, "You're almost a year away from where Sinner started playing 5 days a week, and giving tennis a full go." And I think that in America, it's just very important culturally that people, look at the sport a little bit differently, because I believe the lack of stroke production that we see is because people are in a panic at a very young age.
No, today we had Gretchen Rush, rainy day up here in the mountains, and Gretchen Rush, who played Wimbledon 20 times, she talked to the kids. I said, tell us, I said, okay, tell us about Helena Sukova, tell us about Yana Novotná. I named off players, and then the kids asked some questions. But yeah, it's a long, long road. So this gal who's here, she's 21, amazing athlete. But, through juniors and through college, I know towards the end of her college career, there was certainly an effort to help her from a technical standpoint. But, and she, on her own accord, I said, well, how long do you think you need to stay here? So she's graduated, has her degree, and wants to play pro tennis. She said 6 months. And that's a good start. Most people think you could do it in 6 minutes. But yeah, Laura Sigmund, who, 38 years old. So, I mean, she's 17 years older. So, if you want to hang in there, I'll go, then you can go, Costas. Belinda Bencic, it's great. She's in the semis. She's only 28. She's been around for a long time. She was in the junior doubles final at 15. She won the junior singles at 16. It's interesting, a lot of times, history repeats itself. She's a Czech who, like Martina Hingis, who grew up in Switzerland. I always think it's great too that I'm sure her father had a lot to do. In fact, you get online and go through so many things, but her dad was a hockey player. What comes to your mind, Wimbledon this year?
I don't know, a player, he lost. I don't know if I'm allowed to choose a player who's lost, but Cameron Norrie, I know he doesn't have, the best looking strokes, but there's something to say about, how he does have just the grit in him. He just manages to get the most out of what with what he has. I didn't actually know his background from where he was born, where he grew up, and then where he studied. Myself being, kind of from different cultures. My parents were from different countries. I just kind of growing up into different countries at certain times. It just I can relate to that. But I just think he has that, fighting edge to him, and he lost, but not the prettiest strokes. But there's more than one ways to skin a cat.
One thing with Tracy King, who was a guest a couple weeks ago, she works for Dave at Brookhaven in Dallas, player development, sports psychologist. She talked a little bit about coming up in New Zealand, and then the Brits, they can, with the money they make through Wimbledon, they can sponsor players, and so raised in New Zealand, but now he plays for the UK. One thing I would say about Cameron Norrie is you can almost guess what people were taught. And when you see a service motion, I always tell people don't play the blame game. But when you see Norrie play, you could pretty much say, well, when he was really young, he was taught down together, up together. Or you see that with many, many players. No, he had a great run. He was quarterfinalist, correct?
Yeah.
So he plays Alcaraz. That puts him in the Final Eight club. And so listeners probably know that. But at Wimbledon, there's on site, I mean, they have their own little pub, their own little lounge restaurant. If you've been in the Final Eight, the door is open for you. If not, so it's a nice, one of the nicest honors in all of tennis. Go ahead, Dave. Your turn.
Well, I mean, the Sinner Shelton match just jumped out at me today. I was really looking forward to that to see exactly how, really from Shelton's end, he was going to approach it, because Isner went through it his whole career where he just struggled to break, and I think it's an interesting thing on the return of serve, and going back to what we spoke on the last podcast with interrelating strokes, through a sound ready position, and why we do things the way we do inside of our system, if you want to use that word. And I feel like Shelton could have used a better tactical approach on the returns to maybe take Sinner out of his game. And but I didn't get to watch it point by point, but I had it on my court on the TV going, and we were there as much as we could. But I feel that match, Sinner, obviously, I mean, it's hard to say how you'd get at him, but I don't think you'd want to try to make it an exchange from the red zone of the court and take your chances that way. And a few hiccups here and there, or whoever made them at the wrong time. And I just feel it could have been approached a little differently. But it'd be nice to know the plan going in, what the real plan was, if there was one.
With Shelton, listeners, so for 3 years I had a small place right next to the USTA National Campus, and I can remember making a special trip to go watch Ben Shelton play when he was 15. And unfortunately, one tennis mom in particular just caught me, and it just all these questions and whatever. So I really didn't watch him play as much as I would like to when he was 15. But I certainly saw him play when he was a freshman. Great competitor, raw athlete, that serve, being lefty, obviously the serve, I always tell people about a tennis player, that kid's army's got no air force. In other words, they never attack their serve. They're hitting that ball in the air, and that's not offensive, and they don't take out anything else in the air. But no, he's very, very offensive. I think that serve +1. It's like, well, we've talked about it before. If you were to design a practice for him, if you mentioned Isner. I was listening to Darren Cahill talk about center serve. I think I mentioned that before, and he said their resource, their go-to, was just looking at film of Isner. And when you have a serve like that, you need to just to follow it up with a volley, and then really that line that people use so often, time and space, give them less time to hit it, give them a smaller target to hit into. One other player I've written down is this, if I'm saying it right, Flavio Cobolli.
Yeah.
23 years old. I mean, I spent most of my day looking at a computer screen, but I was in front of the TV. So it's more like I was listening to tennis too much instead of watching it. But no, I certainly watched it a fair bit. What I did on YouTube is and I wasn't successful, but I looked up to see, because you can find almost anything on YouTube, and I just put Flavio Cobolli playing soccer. And I would just bet money that kid is great at soccer. I mean, you could just tell. He's yeah, the way he just moves. I mean, it's just floats across the tennis court. He's fast. Um, Certainly, he put in a great effort. I think for all the parents listening too, is that the emotion from his father. We were watching junior Wimbledon doubles today, rainy day up here, and the juniors are playing, and I mean, every point, their formations and their shot selection. Overall, it was very, very poor doubles. But congratulations to them and congratulations to their parents, because if they've playing at junior Wimbledon, you certainly know, Dave, to get to that level. How's it go? A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's not easy. Your turn, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, you had covered Bencic, who I had wrote down as well, and then another one that I think it's always nice to, you love to see the comeback. The comeback's always greater than the setback, and to see Anna Samova get back to the semifinals here in a totally different stage of her life, really not that far removed from her semifinal debut, I think when she was 17, but I think it's just been fun to watch. I think she's an incredible ball striker. I think she has one of the best backhands out there mechanically. To see how this time around, as she's re-entered the tour after a brief hiatus, seems to have a little bit different perspective. Still feisty, but I think she's been a great story at Wimbledon this year.
I've got a few thoughts down, Amanda. With born in New Jersey, two types of people in the world. I say this about upstate New York too, but I'm sure you can say about North Dakota or Greece. But born in New Jersey, two types of people. Those are born in New Jersey and those that wish they were. But she's only 23. It seems like she's been around forever. She was playing pro tennis at such a young age. I mean, her bio with wins over Sabalenka and Halep and Osaka. Achievement, her sister played at UPenn, graduated from the Wharton School. Actually, Max Fomin, I saw him in Miami in February. He was a junior at the Richmond Hill Country Club, and he had a lot to do with her tennis as a coach. After Richmond Hill, he was either at Mississippi or Mississippi State, and he's been a full-time coach. But yeah, currently 13 in the world. I think that Sophia Kenin comes to my mind as well. I think there's certain people where the family, they're just going to make it. No one has had this experience like Nick Bollettieri. Nick Bollettieri met so many families that wanted to help their child get down the road. So many sets of parents. But yeah, her dad, untimely death, going back to Anisimova. How you say it? Amanda.
Yeah, that was it.
52 dad was only 52 years old, and he had, he was the primary coach. He was the primary force. But Sophia Kenin, same thing with her father. I remember when Kenin won the Australian and went over to go to greet the people in her box and give her dad a hug, and then he called her back and was pointing his finger at her minutes after she had just won. And then I looked around on YouTube. I wanted to hear the answer. Someone asked her, "What was your dad calling you back for?" He said, "Oh, he's coaching me on what to say, who to think." But one thing we did while we're on Amanda is we've had, I'd say, 20 people here even, and I got everybody to line up on the baseline and said, "Okay, Fritz versus Alcaraz. If you think Fritz is going to win, stand in this service box. If you think if Alcaraz is going to win, stand in this service box." Taylor only had one person, I think a young boy, so he's going to cheer for the American. We did the same thing, Sinner versus Djokovic. That was split. Swiatek, Bencic. Bencic had a few. Sabalenka and Anisimova. It wasn't quite as bad where Fritz only had one, but it was very much one-sided with Sabalenka winning. And then we went through. Okay, what if you were their coach? If you were just say 1, 2, 3, no more than 3 things, what would you say to them? Braden was always saying that, keep it simple. Strategy is way overrated. The higher level you go, of course, there's less things to say. I think of John Lafnia Diaga, who lived with us a little bit when he was a kid. He has a famous line in pro tennis: if you have a weakness, they will find it. But Robbie Seguzo, who you know very well, you and I were part of the short run that he and his wife owned an academy in Boca, which is now Chris Everts. But Robbie was playing Jimmy Connors. And Robbie, 21 in the world, his talent was greater than 21 in the world, or his ability, or his reach. But number 1 in the world, I believe, for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned his name earlier. Bob Brett was coaching Robbie, and he was playing Jimmy Connors. And he said, whatever you do, don't ever make him run. So many kids. This college girl, graduate who was here, I mentioned earlier. We had a little exhibition. We have a 7-year-old and 8-year-old. And it's fun to watch them play. They both can play pretty well. So we had the lines people. We just said, okay, it's a very nice setting up here in the mountains, and we have one kid who's the umpire, and we have ball kids, and so the 20 people in the camp. And then I told everyone afterwards. I said the 7-year-old and the 8-year-old, don't think that was just cute. I mean, there was stage development. We created a little bit of a stage, but with that, so many people just hit to the open court. And I ask kids straight up: are you first generation player? Meaning, have your parents been down the road before in tennis? Or are you you're the first kid, second kid, and your parents have never gone down the road in tennis? And sure enough, your parents are highly educated and they know all sorts of things that we don't know. But do they really know tennis? Because most parents will say, "What are you doing hitting up the middle?" And you could say, "Well, you could watch a match on TV." And but I do think that. That hurt as versatile as her game was, Laura Sigmund. If she could have played through the middle more, Anisimova, after the serve, she hits the ball cleaner. She has less moving parts in her strokes. She's not as powerful. She's not as big and not as strong. But, just hit through the middle and not hit, especially short and wide, where the players can really spread the court. With Fritz, he's getting better, but he's not a natural volleyer. But he should just still play principle-based tennis and go forward. So then you just say, well, Fritz and Alcaraz, if they were to play 10 times, I mean, Fritz is 4 in the world, and he's, you don't roll out of bed and win Indian Wells. The guy's a big-time player. But it was this time last year, I think, with Lloyd Harris, who's playing Alcaraz, and Arthur Ashe. And an Agassi line would be engage weapon number 1. And, there's so many things from Agassi. Agassi said about Andy Roddick playing Federer, if the ball goes more than 4 times, just hit the ball in the bleachers. But, we had Sophia Patel, who went to UNC, and she was on the NCAA championship team, and told a story about just telling the players on the team, doubles, kill or be killed. We don't care if you can't volley. Just go up there and not high tech technique, but just stick your racket out. And but anyway, we went through that. Costa, your turn. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Wimbledon?
Choose another player, you mean?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Fabio Fognini. Just an interesting guy, I think. I have actually a pretty funny, cool story about him, but it's probably too long for the podcast. Obviously he's also, I think he retired after.
Yeah, this is his last match.
But I just think me just being interested in trends, what is going on when a country all of a sudden has so many players, I guess, in the top 100, like Italy, or like back in the 80s, it was Sweden or Czech, or I remember in the early 2000s, Argentina. Like, what's going on? And all of a sudden, is it a coincidence? Is there a secret? But yeah, obviously we know Italy now has a bunch of players, whereas when I was growing up, I think they had, just coming into my mind, like there was a guy named David Sanguinetti and I think Bolelli, and they were kind of more journeymen in the singles game. But yeah, what's going on, when all of a sudden you see a trend. And it's the same in every sport. Like, going off a tangent, why do the Netherlands are so good in soccer, or why is New Zealand so good in rugby, or Hungary in water polo? Yeah, that's probably got off too long, but Italy is next to Greece, and it's not that much bigger than Greece. I'm sure there are reasons why all of a sudden they're doing so good, but yeah, it's kind of a case study.
One thing with Fogini, 38, $18 million, number 9 in the world, won 9 titles. And he's not the best player in his family. Flavia Pennetta, She played really well. She was number 1 in doubles, number 6 in singles. Although he played longer, and he outdid her with income, 18 million to 14 million. I know Raven Klaassen tells a story where he's played doubles against Fogini. He goes, that guy's so chilled. He goes, he's I'm getting ready to return. He's up at the net, and he's eating a granola bar during the match. Took it out of his pocket, took a bite, he's chewing on it. I heard in the press conference, he said in some ways he would have liked to have his last match be at Monte Carlo because he had won that tournament. He talked about proud of his career to play and win, and he didn't win any majors, but he did play the same era that the big three. I think of Italian tennis. I think of Frank Butera, pro that we've trained, born and raised. I think actually, like yourself, he was born in the States but raised in Italy and came back. Or you're born in the States, went back to Greece. But to talk about Adriano Pennetta, the guy who beat Borg. Borg played the French 8 times and won at 6, and Panada's the guy who beat him twice. But like Spain and Italy, where the economy's been bad, in Spain and Italy, they've set up tournaments. You go to an international junior tournament, like a lot of parents, they go and they see all those international flags at the Eddie Herr and go, the 12s and 14s is really not that international. All you got to do is say, well, let's look at the draw sheet. Let's just count how many Americans are in the 12s and 14s. But, then you say, well, how many kids are here from Spain? How many kids are from Italy? And because of the economy, they're not the parents aren't writing the check and saying, okay, let's. It's not a big deal to play 12s and 14s. Orange Bowl, Eddie Herr. But I believe that like Spain. In Spain, I think they've had like 50 tournaments equivalent to the $15,000 level. But I think also the 4-minute mile with Roger Bannister in 1954. When you're playing with people and you're practicing with people, they're doing well. You have no off factor. Like the phenomena of Borg was Borg, but really where tennis exploded because of Borg in Sweden. I went to Sweden, been there a few times, but the first time I went, it was in Germany, and the exchange rate between the Deutschmark and the dollar. I say, okay, I'm going to go to a lot of stories, but I went up to Sweden with Mark Hamlin. What are they doing in Sweden? And tennis players come from everywhere, but so when Wilander came along, I believe it was 6 Swedes on the men's side in the top 10 at the same time. because that inner belief system, I think it's really tough for Americans to have a sense of belonging. We're such a big country. I spend a lot of time in these European countries. Well, okay, gee, they only have 10 million people, but the younger players are, really exposed to. They get to be around the top players. I think of being in Sweden, I think of Växjö. Both my sons were there, but my son Connor spent quite a bit of time there. And there's a sign, I'm sure it's increased slightly, but it's 88 ATP titles. Of course, one person could win the bulk of those, like a Wilander. But with Billie Jean King, you got to see it to believe it. Actually, one of your students, Dave, I was shocked. Shane Vincent, he was visiting our place. He was in our place one particular time. He was playing at Futures. And, we're having a meeting, and I said, Shane, who's the best person you've ever practiced with? And when we said Roger Federer, it kind of made me walk backwards a little bit. Here's one thought. We'll turn it back over to you, Dave. People got to listen. Novak Djokovic, who is a great, great player. I'd have to say with nutrition and flexibility, okay, I don't like that greatest of all time. And, he's not playing doubles, and he's improved so much. So his instincts aren't like the players from years ago who were playing with wooden rackets and they're wearing spikes and they had to go forwards. So the game has changed in that sense. But Roger Federer was in the Royal Box and he said, well, I wish I could, like a guy over there in the Royal Box, I could serve and volley a little bit and play shorter points. So the guy who's just referred to as the best player of all time, and certainly that's an argument for sure. And he's going to definitely come on top as be one of the best players of all time. But to just say, I can't serve and volley for a few points. On one of the match points today, he served and volleyed, but he served wide to the forehand, and Kobeli, took the angle and passed him. And I think even at that level, it's like, okay, you're not serving volleying that much, so hit a body serve, so the ball is going to come back to the middle. And then, and he has really, really improved on the volley side. He said the same thing one time when he was accepting the trophy at the Australian Open. He said, Mr. Laver, I know I'm supposed to be at the net more. I'm working on it. But I think people miss out on some of those subtle comments. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, well, with Djokovic, you could back the clock up 4 months ago, and everybody had kind of wrote him off. And it's easy to forget. I was telling the kids today at Academy, I said the last 2 Wimbledons he's been in the final, and he certainly won it a few times. So, but I respect him in the sense that he reminds me a little bit of Lendl, who was kind of in a never-ending quest to improve things, even if maybe we would have had him push in a little different direction. I think that just relentless kind of Tiger Woods. I'm gonna constantly get my swing better, my game better in that regard. I think Novak, the what ifs, if he had been playing a lot of doubles in a traditional sense from a very young age, what if, what would have happened? But no, I wrote down two players in the doubles, just to give a shout out for college tennis, Cash and Glasspool, who will be in the semifinals tomorrow, I believe, with Cash having a background, Mississippi State to transfer at OU or Oklahoma State, I believe. And then Glasspool, 31 years old, and, went to UT and I believe in 2015 won the NCAA doubles championship. But, I'm always preaching to the kids here about how doubles can be a great lifeline for them out there if they do have that dream. And, I think it's just nice to see some people who have gone through the college route, and Hitchikata obviously is the third one that is in the doubles draw that also had a brief stint in college. Going
back and come back to this comment, but with Djokovic being in the last two Wimbledon finals, when the media was beating up Sampras for having not won in a while, my opinion would be there's a very good chance that if it wasn't based on TV, for years and years at the U.S. Open, the semis would be on Friday, and then you would get, the Saturday off, and the men would play the finals on Sunday. So when he lost to Hewitt, and then he lost to Safin, and people age differently. I think there would be a very good chance if he had played on the Friday, had the Saturday off, that he would have won those two U.S. Opens. I don't want to take anything away from Safin or Hewitt. And I think at Lendl, oh my word, 8 U.S. Opens in a row. Now, he doesn't say this. He says just the opposite. But for me, 8 U.S. Opens, like Andy Roddick's 3 Wimbledons, 3 Wimbledon finals, I would say, geez, to get to 3 Wimbledon finals, that's better than winning 1 U.S. Open. I think people forget that Roddick was in the finals 3 times. That's a major, major tennis player. But Lendl, he skipped the French, and Tony Roach, his coach, the great Australian, said, your ego's too big and you're too greedy. What you need to do if you want to win Wimbledon is you got to play that way year round. And in 87, he got to the finals, lost to Cash. And so it's like, well, he didn't do what the coach recommended. It's kind of like a U.S. junior thinking that they're going to learn how to play on clay. They find some private citizen that has a clay court, and they're going to hit on clay for 5 days and be ready for clay courts. I always tell people, if you could play on clay every day for a year, when we go out on the clay courts, almost every time, and we've got 16 clay courts, is we don't use the 4 at the bottom of the mountain, but we have them, is because there's a golf course at the bottom of the mountain, at the top of the mountain. Is we go out and we do kick a boot, we do speed skating, put your hands behind your back, and you have the slide foot and the breaking foot. We show that on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. And, the kids are chit-chatting. No. Start again, no chit-chatting, get down to a 90-degree angle. It's kind of like at the Aussie Open, and they show the players working out. They're doing more of that at the other majors now. And, Nadal's doing that 90-degree wall sit before he goes on the court. But coming back to Robert Cash, that's not the same player who played Ohio State. A player named Cash played Ohio State. There's
Cash and Tracy, and then this is a different Cash. Yeah.
Okay. Because
I think you're thinking of Cash and Tracy. They're doing well as well. They're just coming off the Challengers.
Yeah, I remember Ty Tucker wanted Cash to visit, work on a serve, get a serve filmed, and he was in Orlando with his girlfriend. And anyway, I say, we'll come and pick you up. But we never worked with him. But I just remember that name. But no, I remember when I was young and single, and I lived in South Florida, and I lived in Southern Cal, and at one time I was very confident if you named the top 250 players in the world, I could tell you all about how they play. But not as current. I think it's very, very important to watch people play. I'll go with one. Somebody who I've never seen play is this girl, Hannah Klugman, who's only 16, but she won the Orange Bowl at 14. I remember when Tiafoe won the Orange Bowl at 15. I was saying what they should do now is not have play any more tournaments. Let's take a year to year and a half, because people prove that they're winners. They prove that they're winners, and you don't have to go with what you got. So, and again, Tiafoe is a great player, but I would go through the mechanics on the backhand volley, the forehand, ground stroke, even a few things he could do better on the serve. But that's one thing about, unlike looking up Flavio playing soccer or Flavio Cabelli, I watched her serve today. I watched her return. I watched her play at clay. I watched her play on grass. There's a lot of things you could do. It took me a long time. I had coaches working for me where I had purchased the laptops, and I didn't have a laptop. I was still going to the desk, and but I'm up to the speed where when I watch TV, I have a computer on my lap. That's really amazing that people are watching TV. They've got a laptop, they've got a telephone. With actually in her on her Wikipedia page, a girl that's now at your place, Cole Reeves, started. I know I spent a lot of time with Alanis Hamilton. It's in the Wikipedia page where Klugman, she beat Hamilton and her partner, and then lost in the finals of Wimbledon doubles. But
Yeah.
but it's just interesting. I mean, she was even interviewed on American TV. They had her on the Tennis Channel, and now you could follow a player from a very young age. I remember my father, civil engineer. He had a huge antenna on the back of his car, so he could listen to hockey games on the radio. He would go to the highest mountain, not the highest mountain, the highest hill in the county we lived in, and we had a TV because we moved 150 miles from the Canadian border. After 10 years, my first 10 years was right next to the Canadian border. But we had a TV that you could just turn to Kingston, and we were the only house in this little village that had got Hockey Night in Canada. But he had all the records. They had a newsletter called College Hockey. This is really digressing, but Dave Taylor played for Clarkson College in my hometown. And after one period, my father said, he was a big fan of Clarkson College hockey, he said that's the best player I've ever seen play at Clarkson. One period. And Dave Taylor went on to, of all the players out of Clarkson, I would say he probably had like 400 plus goals in the NHL. So I just say that because people need to watch. You just need to constantly watch. I've been called a lot of things. I've been called that word that penetrates glass in traffic. He is such a... But Brandon used to call me the observer's observer. I mean, just to sit and watch people. People read about McEnroe when he used to go from Douglastown to Trinity School in Manhattan, is that he was streetwise. You know, he could be in Grand Central Station and he'd be on the subway and he would just watch everybody. You know, back in the day, we used to hitchhike everywhere. Not the girls, but the boys. There was no problem to just hitchhike. And I'm talking across states. Like I went to prep school in New Hampshire and hitching back to upstate New York. And we were always told when you get in the car of a perfect stranger, memorize their license plate. And my mother's line was, well, that's good. You recite the license plate, then they have to kill you. Yeah. But go ahead. Who's next? Costas?
Sure. Player we were watching kind of after practicing in the morning. I forget her first name. German lady, Siegmund?
Laura Siegmund?
Yeah.
Laura Siegmund.
Siegmund.
Yeah. Kind
All
of.
three of us are wrong. I've spent enough time in Germany. Go ahead.
So sorry if I mispronounced it, but she almost made it. I'm going to kind of focus more not on her game, but I think I heard she was 37 or 38 years old, and yeah, it was probably a breakthrough, I guess. I don't know her that well, but for her to reach so far in a major, but just what comes to my mind is patience and how difficult that is for humans in general to just stick around and just be patient and focus on the long term instead of the short term. But yeah, I just that's what I thought when I saw her play. There's this quote I really like. I know quotes can a lot of times become cliches, so I will try to be careful, but it's a quote said, it's easier to find men that are willing to die than men that are willing to just suffer and be patient. So yeah, I struggle with it myself. That was something that Julius Caesar said. So yeah, one person told me when you think of someone who's tough, what quality comes to your mind? And he told me, for sure, patience. So I don't know.
Patience is a virtue. With what I did, we're in a whistle. Is we have this big TV, but it's only on the indoor court or the first court. I mean, it's a huge TV. I don't know. I guess you could buy a bigger one now, but it certainly was the biggest you could buy at the time. And I just call the kids in, where she was, close to closing it out in straight sets and then hanging in there in the third set. But I think one thing for the parents, if some people are listening to this to tennis car, is look at the legs. How many miles do the kids have on the legs? And, we published that we're going to work 6 hours. Today we worked 8.5. The weather's not so hot, but it's like, no, what else you got to do? If you don't have schoolwork, we're going to just keep on going. But there's stick-to-itiveness. You're not going to find that word in the dictionary, but stick-to-itiveness. Another one you're not going to find in the dictionary is quit your belly aching. Both those, I remember I saw those in a magazine or a catalog, and I bought one for one son and one for the other. But with the mixed doubles, Taylor Townsend is still going. Her ability to come into the net, fun to watch. It's but it to me it's this idea that what's going on at the U.S. Open. We talked about that for a second with mixed doubles. The young gal, what's her name? She played at Arizona State. She's won 4 mixed doubles titles. But yeah, they're playing the 10-point tiebreaker for mixed. I mean, it's like, come on, don't shorten up the scoring system. I don't think there's anything worse. It's got to be right up there in college tennis. They're playing doubles, playing to 6. I mean, how did that ever happen? But we've touched upon it before, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with, 16 teams, $1 million to the winning team, where the mixed doubles in the US Open now is, it's going to be set up. I mean, the Laver Cup was everybody saying, well, it's going to be an exhibition, but that's, I think most people say that's been a really nice addition to the tennis calendar. And maybe this at the US Open would be, a couple of years back, you would remember the name, Dave. You're older than Costas. Is Jesse Witten from Naples, Florida?
Yeah.
And there was an opportunity for amateurs across America to try to get into the qualies of the U.S. Open. But I think just to have an event be closed and have it just be 16 players and it just takes away from it a little bit. But we can come back to that. He's looking up.
Was it Krosik? No?
Yeah, you've got it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
But they asked her, and she said, well, she had a very graceful answer that she's disappointed because of the tradition of tennis, but she understands that it is a business. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I mean, I'm excited to see. This is obviously a headline match, right, with Iga coming up in Bencic. But it's interesting to me on the rebound capability of people. And I think that everybody, the resilience aspect, and it's certainly been a period for Iga where she's been challenged, on a personal level, all these different things you can see that she's battling. And to see her reactions after her wins, to see her kind of trying to almost reestablish her territory, I think. I just really enjoyed watching that. She seemed to have lost some joy. I mean, obviously winning makes things a lot happier for people, but she just seemed like really a ship that was sinking quickly. And And so to see her being a little bit more resilient, bouncing back here in this tournament, I'm anxious to see what will happen. And it seems to me she almost feels like she has to prove it to herself, and right now more than to anybody else. But maybe I'm reading into it. Maybe I'm looking at it differently. But I'm really curious to see how that particular women's draw is going to end up this year.
With Madison Keys having won the Australian, I find myself, I'll cheer for the person who's going to help tennis teaching the most. It's pretty easy to cheer for Alcaraz for a lot of reasons, but that guy, overall, his technical base, like, wow. Do people really have an eye for it? But I mean, he's just so good technically. Certainly Madison Keys, big serve, big forehand. Hasn't really come forward, but just think again, her parents, herself. I mean, everybody's helped her out. It's such a big deal to win a major. I was talking to Rob Krajicek today. Austin Krajicek has been in it a lifetime, and he's got a pretty impressive background in the U.S. So you say a kid's won Kalamazoo. He's been in our national championship for 16s and 18s. He was an All-American numerous times in college, and then cracked the top 100 in singles. He's number one in doubles. And, he's right at this point just has the one major. But it's like you say someone like an Agassi, where Sam Querrey said on TV, he's sitting with Agassi and McEnroe. He's a little intimidated. But as great as Agassi is, he only won he only won the French once. He only won Wimbledon once. And I believe he has 8 total. But, it's kind of like Edberg. One year he won the U.S. and Wimbledon, but he lost in the first round of the other 2. But I would like to see people who haven't won. I mean, I would love to see Fritz win. I mean, Alcaraz has already got 5, right, in center.
Yeah.
That I would love to see the gal from New Jersey.
Anna Smova.
Yeah. With I think we have to go back. How long is it? The Fogini story. I mean, I do know people do listen to our podcast because I told that joke about Roger Federer. So I got some text messages, and it just said your old lady too. So I know a few people are listening to this podcast. So what's the Fogini? Go back to that.
So actually, it's just I don't know. I really don't think it's made up. It's a true story. I used to spend a lot of time at the club growing up. I was just hanging out at the club, and we used to, especially in the summers, go there in the morning, sometimes hang out and then play in the evening. And then the fun part was after the evening practice, we would just hang out and watch, if it was tennis on TV or soccer on TV, kind of in the lounge area. And it was always a fun period because you would hang out with the older people and they would crack jokes, and it was just fun. So one evening, it was me, my father, my brother, a guy who plays on the tour right now, and his father and his siblings. And he was just telling us stories about him playing in southern France. This guy, he said he was playing he was a very extroverted guy, and he was telling us how he was playing the best tennis it was really good tennis, and he happened to play this 12-year-old, and he beat him 7-5, 7-6, something along those lines.
He beat the 12-year-old.
No, he lost to the
12-year-old.
12-year-old. The father was a club pro and a really good player, probably something like a 4-5, 5-0 player if you had to rank him. And he lost to the 12-year-old. And he said, I can't believe that 12-year-old, what is happening to him? And then a couple of years later, we were watching again, probably 2 or 3 years later, we were watching the same TV, and he just goes, oh, that's the boy I played in France when he was like 10 years ago when he was 12 years old. The guy who I'm talking about is Apostolos, who is Stefano's father. So it's just a cool story to see how things come along and how small the world is. But yeah, but I just still remember it. He was like, "Oh, that's the boy I lost to." But anyway,
Yeah, one story just reminds me of another. Well, thanks for sharing that. But Haz Iswan from Malaysia, his country actually was flattering. They funded him for a year to hang out with us, and he played tennis at Louisville. It's interesting. He played Davis Cup for Malaysia, and he was like number 4 at Louisville. Just to let you know, college tennis. I could go over so many things where someone's like they're number 6 in their country and they're number 6 on their college tennis team. But he, for his PhD, his dissertation, he made a study of the 14 and unders, and I saw all the films of 14 and unders from the La Petits, and then 10 years later, and they were so professional. Actually, even sometimes more professional. But his thing also was, his point was that the tactical behavior didn't change. How they played tactically at 14 is how they played the rest of their career. But having seen the film, is that it's just the way they handled themselves. My son Connor played quite a bit of tennis, and this is true. If you teach people to play a decent level of tennis with their opposite hand, they will play better tactically. They're going to keep the ball in play from the back of the court. They're not going to, they're going to be a little more conservative, and they're, when we say play defensively, I mean offense is defensive. You got to rip the ball up the middle. You got to hit it high and heavy. But playing it with his opposite hand, he would definitely do his best to make his approach shot, and he's going to get his nose right on top of the net. But I remember as a young boy that we coached, we helped the family out big time. It comes down to the cost factors. And this one kid, he ended up being number 1 candidate in the 10s, 12s, and 14s. And he used to own Dennis Shapovalov, beat him like breadsticks and bagels. And then years later, I asked him, what happened? And he said, well, Dennis was coachable and I wasn't. But I can remember this young kid. I said, "What are you going to play my son right now?" And he's going to play you with his left hand. And this 12-year-old kid goes, "I refuse it. I'm not playing." I said, "Well, it's not a problem. But I mean, you're a guest at our tennis house. Just go tell your dad that if you don't play this match, and on top of that, if you do play and you tank, you guys are moving out and you're staying in a hotel tonight." And so they ended up playing. But I think one thing about this is so important for parents that are listening is that your child, they only see what's right in front of them. Billie Jean King, if you want to be it, you got to see it. I know, Dave, at your place, you've developed all these college tennis players, and there's been so many players that have gone before the players that are there today. And I think so many times, some kid's going to become the alpha dog, and they're looking around and like, who am I going to hit with? And it's just so bad. It's just so bad. Is that there's people that have gone before you. I just think of the success, for example, that we've had, with players playing doubles. And I mean, I don't like the credibility game where, well, we coach so and so. We could take an intermission and then turn it over to questions, but let's go one more round. But before we do that, this happened, Dave. I know that this one happened for you or me, but got a young player. The real Rafa comes in from Portland, Oregon. And the real Rafa has a full head of hair, and he's looking for a rubber band. And he's even working with the woman behind the front desk. He needs a rubber band because he's got to tie his hair up. But I just want to let you know that Costas is such a nice guy that he took, what do you call it? Is it a rubber band? What do you call that?
Yeah.
There's got to be a name for it.
I don't know. You just go to, it's from CBS. You just,
So anyway, we had one guy who, when it was over, he took the rubber band off, and then his hair flew open, and over his shoulders, and so Costa got his rubber band back. But that's a hair story for you, Anderson.
Andreas does that every morning to tease me. He has the hair that goes up into a man bun, and jet black hair that he lets out, and then he winds it up into a ball on top of his head. And I prefer not having hair, if I'm being really honest. I would go bald every time.
Coming back to Wimbledon, I do find myself, I do have to make phone calls and I do have to do emails, especially right now. We're trying to organize the team up here more off court, what we're doing, and working with Wintergreen Management, the resort. But you asked that question last week, is that I'd like to think I have a little more wisdom than some of the juniors. So for me to watch Wimbledon and try to tell them what happened is, but they could look at it as a selfish act that I'm spending more time for the TV than they are. If someone was here for 2 days, though, fortunately we don't have anybody, which people really, we'll do the best we can. You come in for 2 days, but we really got to go to town with the video work. But let's go. You have a few questions?
Yeah, I have a few.
Or you want to go more on Wimbledon, and we'll wrap this thing up? What do you got?
I'm good with questions. Steve, these will be for you.
Okay.
Costas and Phil, I'll get you guys next time. So hypothetical kind of question here. Steve, if you could coach a current player on the ATP, one on ATP, one on the WTA, you kind of had a 5-year, you get to coach them, no interference. Who would you pick and why? And, with the primary goal being obviously to that's their profession, to try to capture slams and make a dent in the sport. But who would you pick and why?
They're already on the tour?
Yeah, current ATP or WTA.
Well, this is good for the listeners. In training tennis teachers, I tell people all the time, so juniors are walking by or walking with us to the parking lot. Actually, we have a place that's a half a mile away. They're just walking back, and they walk by all these club players, and they never watch. Just like at a junior tournament that they're actually playing in, is they don't watch anybody. I'll ask people, okay, so you're top 10 in your section. Tell me someone in your section who plays all over the court. Tell me someone from your section who serves and volleys. And they go silent. Seriously, they go silent. I mean, but no, I tell people, when you watch someone play, you need to manufacture a lesson in your mind. Like, okay, all right, so the person has a high toss. They have their palm is up. They're pulling open to the left. They're collapsing at their waist. So then it's not necessarily information, but then what's the application? I ask kids all the time, if you're coaching that kid, what drill would you do? I think with top players, the better someone becomes, the more suspicious they become. Because the better someone becomes, the more people talk to them. All you have to do is go to a junior tournament, and I call them merchants of flesh, third base coach. They just want to coach somebody who's already about to score. I have all the respect to the world for Jim Lair. People want to go back, and we dedicated a couple of podcasts to Jim. Jim was a guest. He had a lot to do with our training in person years ago. And I was, Lair. He said, one time I saw him at the U.S. Open, and he said, "Smith, you still yelling at kids?" And I said, "Lair, you still coaching people that have already won?" And because of that marquee coaching, with understand he's working with Riley Opelka. And a lot of times the people he works with, it's privileged information. He doesn't tell people that he's working with them. But the same thing watching a match with, talking to the juniors today to go through stats, coming back to Lloyd Harris and Raven Klaassen, and he's playing Alcaraz. Lloyd Harris on the number one court in the world is playing the number one player at the U.S. Open. Is an Agassi line, engage weapon number one. And, but Harris, he didn't do it. He hit 2 first serves. The Rod Laver lesson. If you can't get 1 out of 2 in, you don't deserve to win the point. And Medvedev did that where a couple summers ago, Djokovic was just teeing off on his serve. That's kind of like the 3-point shot in basketball. It took a long time for people to figure out the stats. I liked basketball before. I think they should change the rule where they would work the ball more and try to get on the inside instead of people just shooting from half court. But Mresmo, somebody years ago, I remember just thinking,
it's funny you say that, because when Connor was living with me, we talked about this, and he said you'd pick Mresmo. That was years ago too.
Is that you could just help some people out. I mean, they just have one glaring weakness. So I'd have to stop and think about one player in particular, but
I should have said excluding kind of the top 4 or 5 players in the world, but a name that came out to me that I think would be fun, and I don't know anything about him really.
Who's this?
But I think Diallo. I think Diallo would be a kid that if he had 5 years of no interference, he could make a big impact on his game.
Well, one thing about Diallo is Peter Cobelt came off the tour and at his dad's place, Paul Cobelt, New Albany, Ohio, and he gets a phone call from Kaufman at Kentucky, and they said, "Hey, you want to be a volunteer?" I mean, I think my son Connor, he was offered a couple of jobs that he didn't even apply for. Because I think people realized that Connor would be good in the locker room, funny guy and sense of humor. But Peter was assigned the young, tall Canadian that you're talking about. So, you never know. Like to think that, some of the things that we shared with Cobelt, we have video. He changed his strokes and ended up being ranked 1 in the NCAAs. Someone, you say, well, not the top people, but for me, I'd go back to Jack Kramer, and Coco Gauff has enough money. Vic Braden used to say, how many steaks can you buy? She just won the French, but she also exited the first round of Wimbledon. And, she's still young. Was she 21, 22? 21, I think. Is that
21, yeah.
Is that, I think you could say this. I mean, I could say this. I could take a lawnmower apart, but I don't know if I could put it back together. But, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and, Coco Gauff, hey, you want to win more? You have all the money in the world. And, there's somebody that, how could you help her with her forehand? And, we always say winning's not confusing. It's totally confusing. And that, Welby Van Horn, the worst thing that can happen to you is you hit a lucky shot that you keep searching for it the rest of your life. And I'd have to give that more thought. But you could name a player, and I could tell you, if I'm familiar with a player, I would tell you that this is how they could get to another level. Look at Tommy Paul, just on his own. And who's the gentleman who coaches him? I know he worked with the USTA. I was on the road.
Stein.
Yeah, Brad Stein. I was on the road. Just got to know him through being on the road. And, he was not your typical USTA coach. I know you're not supposed to label anyone, but he was not a yes person by any means. If he had something to say, he's going to say it. And but on his own accord, he said he's just started studying film. Where did the influence come from? But he's, I was watching, you'll say I was watching Henman, I was watching Rafter, and he started coming forward more. And Tommy Paul, he's really more on the disciplinarian. He's really disciplined now, but that thing with Lombardi years ago, who are you going to give the ball to, a milk drinker or a whiskey drinker? So Tommy Paul was a guy early in his career that, he could stay out late and party and this and that. And there's a lot to be said for that. In my sport growing up, the kid who just stares at their hockey sticks, they used to say, you're squeezing that stick too tight, And back in the day when I was a kid, there was beer on the bus in college hockey. And, people just have to watch the movie Miracle on Ice, and that was a reality. But no, the players, really like Sabalenka. I saw her doing this volley exchange. I think you said that in the last podcast that you saw him doing that, or she was doing that with Djokovic. She maybe eat my words a little bit because she did hit some conventional volleys. But behind that big serve, it's no different than Isner playing one up, one back doubles. And now Isner has a podcast where he's beating himself up with Query. He's beating himself up. And I mean, they're telling the world that they had terrible volleys. And I can remember telling Paul Roeder years ago that this is when Sam Query was 14 years old. Paul Roeder at 3 different times was hired by the USTA. And he was a gopher for Vic Braden. He was a gopher for Gideon Ariel when I was a gopher for Vic Braden. You know, he's biomechanist, but his father is Davis Cup captain of the Netherlands, and I remember just saying, you don't want the Sam Querys of the future volleying like that. You know, so you know that I think you go player by player. You know, you're probably looking at for somebody who's pretty close. You mean like Diallo?
Yeah, somebody who hasn't probably got Brad Gilbert's eye yet.
That Brad Gilbert, you remember one of his understudies was Andy Roddick, and Andy Roddick said on his podcast, "I'm from Nebraska, I don't do grips." The people need to know that Gilbert, you know, he certainly was helping Coco Gauff out, but he's not going to. He doesn't do grips either, and you know he's going to stay high and heavy, and you know I really think that short term, you know, he got inside her head. You know, like everybody's picking on you, saying your forehand's so bad. You know, prove to the world that you can get that ball back high and heavy. And, but yeah, it's not that I'm really stumped, but I mean,
I'll come up with a couple of names for you for the next one, and we can end with it there.
Well, but with that, you know, I go back to. People would laugh at this, but they don't get it. May 10th, 1976, Vic Braden, Tennis is in the Stone Ages. It's an article in Sports Illustrated. And Vic's a very humble guy, but he said, if you give me 8 10-year-olds that are just average athletes, and I could help them from a biomechanical standpoint, 10 years later, they'll all be in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. And, you know, our sport is not played at a high level, because our sport is not taught at a high level. And I think, you know, Andy Roddick got himself maybe a little criticism for after that French Open between Senner and Alcaraz. They were saying tennis players are the greatest athletes of the world. I think you could say Alcaraz and Sinner are great athletes, but I don't think across the board you could say that we have great athletes. I think that tennis kids and their parents need to realize you have chosen a very tough sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's very forgiving with the scoring system. You know, the Braden line, ball comes out of a ball machine at 30 miles an hour. You change the racket face by 1 degree, ball goes 6 feet further. You know, most kids have been taught to use a really strong continental grip, racket face open at a 45-degree angle, the whole thing. You know, the pros don't say what they do or do what they say. You know, like a Ryo Opelka beating up on doubles. I mean, you know, he certainly was introduced to tennis through Tom Gullickson and lots of positives, and he's had injuries and this and that. But if he knew how to play doubles, if he was taught the right way when he was a young kid, you know, it's like Del Potro. You know, obviously growing up on the clay in Argentina, correct?
Yeah.
He wasn't acrobatic at the net. You know, if you don't start going to the net at a young age, Joel Trucker said it so well. It's like you're learning a third language, and you just keep telling these parents. I told a parent today, your kid would be better off being here. ITF is for idiots driving foolishly. Your kid wants to do that because they want to play in the junior majors. Well, that's a bonus if they can play in the junior majors, but there's lots of people who didn't even think about playing that, like say a Sabalenka, or I mean they didn't really pursue, you know, getting to the highest level with ITF. And generally the reason for that is they can't afford it. They can't afford it. And, you know, the late bloomer. But no, I think...
Well, I think with the majors and the juniors traveling to, especially out of the country, I mean, I think the most recent story about it too, Steve, that's just worth repeating, is Sheldon needing his passport to go to the main draw of the Aussie Open.
No, I told someone. I told someone that today, and you know, growing up on the Georgia Tech and then the Florida campus and being around all those athletes, you know, my oldest son you know both of them well, went to the Jesuit school in Tampa, but the high school team, there's a beautiful park just walking distance away from the Jesuit school, but the tennis players were never around the athletes. You got to be around the athletes. Coming back to that kid, you can just tell that, you can tell by watching a college tennis match, you pretty much tell who grew up on red clay. You can also, when you watch a college tennis match, go, that kid can play soccer. My son Connor was in Germany for the entire summer during the time the World Cup was there. And not that he learned to be a great soccer player, but if you watch him pick up a tennis ball, he used to entertain himself by how he would pick up a tennis ball. And he actually looked like a soccer player. But a lot of American kids, they don't realize if they're good enough to go play on a college tennis team, let's say 50-50, 50% foreigners, 50% Americans. I would do this. In fact, I talked to a couple people today about going back over to Germany to do some teaching. And one of the first thing I do when I'm in Germany on an indoor carpet, get the coaches in there help and say, hey, why don't you guys show us how you play mini tennis soccer with a tennis ball. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing. I used to play tennis with a guy from Italy in my beginning days as a tennis bum in Boca Raton, Florida. And he was a waiter at the Boca Hotel. And Vincent. And somebody would hit a ball to him, he'd stop it with the instep of his either right or left foot, didn't matter. And then you hit it up on his thigh, then you hit it up on his head, and then you hit it overhead. He wasn't a very good tennis player because he had terrible grips. But it was like, it's just amazing. And that's all gone away, the sandlot sports. And, I think with situational training, coming back to telling a dad today, your daughter would be better off to just come here for the next week, skip this international tournament. And then you just tell them, well, that tournament you're going to, all the really good players are in Europe right now. They're not at such and such island. And that's one good thing about the UTR is you can just look at the draw sheet. Then you know what the level is. But we'll play a 5-set match in the morning, 5-set match in the evening up here. We're in the 70s, and maybe low 80s on a hot day, and but you actually work on those things. Like today, again, picking on these kids, it's watching the Wimbledon junior doubles. I mean, years ago, the commentators on TV were not edifying the players like they are now. They would just, not really necessarily beat up on the players, but if you listen to the players too, I think pro players for the most part are comfortable in their own skin. Teaching pros struggle more with their ego. And, like Agassi, said, never got a free point off his serve. Braden asking Agassi, why don't you come to the net? And he says, have you seen me volley? So, coming back to say a Coco Gauff, she can volley. I think a Carrie Melville Reed who hit a side spin forehand. Coco Gauff could go short term hitting a side spin forehand. And let me share this story about Billie Jean King. Actually, Gretchen Rush, who mentioned she brought a senior player in for me to meet, but anyway, let me go with Carrie Melville Reed. Side spin forehand. Coco Gauff is going to modify the grip, and if we're doing this, you're only 21 years old, and you want to win a bunch of majors. You've already won 2. That's the tough part. And one, she could be doing a lot more serve and volley, and if she does that, it's like Pete Sampras' backhand. There was a Swedish player who actually had a winning record over him. You'd have to think of his name here in a second. But it was so hard to get to Sampras' backhand, because he was controlling the ball on the service game. When he's serving, you weren't going to get the ball to his backhand because he was serving volley. And then when he was returning, certainly his forehand, people talk about his serve, but his peers voted like 3 years in a row that his forehand was the best shot in tennis. And that was the best shot in tennis. But Billie Jean King went all the way to Australia to work with Mervyn Rose. Mervyn Rose was a very good player, but then after his playing career, he was known to be a very good teacher, coach. And she went there to work on her forehand. And she came back and she kept telling everybody, my forehand's great. My forehand's now my stronger side. And it was a bluff. And what she said after she retired, my forehand was always suspect. My forehand never really got that much better. But she just kept telling people, I'm hitting my forehand great. I went down to see Mervyn Rose. And, but with how's it go to never change a winning game, always change a losing game. And, say, going back to your question, Jessica Pegula, she was playing doubles with Krajicek. Krajicek, I said, hey, she's looking for a coach. Why don't you recommend Raven Klaassen or Andy Fitzell? And, and he said, well, you just go through the agent and, Austin's too polite and too nice. And he didn't contact her. Fair enough. But she has a very solid game. And, but I think to work with people on their stats, like, how successful are you when you come in? And, she's playing people that are better movers than she is. So she, in a lot of ways, she could be really helped out in a very, very simple way. Yeah, the other day with Laura Sigmund, I mean, she's got almost a forehand grip on her backhand when she hits that one-hander. And the slice, the ball, she hits heavy slice and the ball stays low. With when Federer played Santora, he played really well against Santora because he said he just attacked his forehand. He goes, I'm not staying back. I'm not staying back and facing into that trickery. I'm coming in. And so it's a really interesting question. But I think straight across the board, Alcaraz would be the person who'd be, like, okay, his center has a better serve. And there's boom, boom, boom. These are the reasons why. I mean, like, here's why Kyrgios can hit his serve. I mean, he is way out to the right. The racket, that horizontal plane it makes behind him. So many kids, they toss the ball over their head and they don't realize that, you imagine being a baseball player and throwing that way for really like almost a decade. Kids, they play just between the ages of 8 and 18, and then someone's going to say, well, this is how you serve. And it's like, yeah, bad miling. But to get a player to listen to you. I one time was down in Delray, and we're at a restaurant with all these guys on the ATP tour, and Brandon Flanagan said afterwards, you realize all those guys were listening to you? I said, yeah, but they talk about different numbers than I do. And the numbers, the guys at the very top, I mean, they're around so much their own money and the business. It's like they have an MBA, and maybe they even dropped out of high school. But then are they going to have played well enough to get their pension? And then you find out that's one set of numbers. Then they're talking about fantasy football. They're not talking. The pro players are not talking about tennis math. They have never, for the most part, they've never heard it, and even have the commentators on TV. And, so it's kind of like it's a closed fraternity, that sorority that, you have the Howard Cosell thing. If you didn't play the game, you don't know the game. Dennis Van Meer, Caca de Toros. I mean, it's, Vic Braden used to always say, when you listen on the Pro Tour, the coach comes up and says, when you're playing indoors, what do you like to drink? The coaches, a lot of times, are taking a really subservient role. Then when they're asked, this is a repeated thought. Kids were listening to Andy Roddick. Now that it's on TV, his podcast is on TV. He's got an audience. He's got huge numbers. And I said, yeah, I love this stuff. I can listen to this all day. But once again, I said, when he says something that you can measure, let me know. Because I just sat down and I started having lunch in the same room. And then he said, Federer's got a 6-inch return. And, he also said, well, Roger's an artist. He's a technician. I just have to hit the crap out of the ball. When you listen to the players, there's so many podcasts right now where they're talking about, it's so subjective. And they're talking about the bounce and the heat and the strings and this and that. And that all is very, very important. But why don't we go one more question? We'll call it a night.
I've got a couple that might take a lot longer, but I'll give you this one because it was at the bottom of my list. Because as we watch Wimbledon, I think you said it, every family there has a story, not just a player, and the struggles and the sacrifice. If you could comment, how important do you feel the household culture is to a junior player with competitive goals, reaching those goals that they have? How important is the household culture?
Well, titled Jimmy Connor's book, Outsider, but I'm certainly an outsider. Billie Jean King, the coordinators and the coordinates and the subordinates, and like we on the outside, we have a pretty good handle on what's going on with the USTA. People that leading people in the USTA, and they started in '87 with player development. They have no idea what you're doing out in Dallas. They should be interested in what you're doing in Dallas. The attitude of the household, so I'm looking at the screen, and it's like, well, it was something. I'll just do this for a few minutes. Well, there's going to be some things that are posted, and I'll give you direct and indirect stories. So the story of the household, Patrick Gibson, he's in Newport. He lost in the first round. He's had such bad luck with injuries. One of the things he did when my son stopped playing, Patrick, I was the first person he asked to be his coach. My son wasn't interested in that opportunity, but why did I mention Patrick? I'm at Indian Wells with him and watching him play. He wins the doubles playing one up, one back. But he gets to play the U.S. Open, and I just think, and his dad said to me, it's amazing. I said to his dad one time, I said, tennis just eats people up and spits them out. Now his dad, it's got an amazing story, but he's a heart surgeon, and so I say, tennis just eats people up and spits them out. And he said, Steve, so's life. But Patrick, he didn't, he's a big guy now, big serve. He didn't go forward enough when he was younger. And, as far as, Matt Clore was a go-to guy, but I spent so much time with Patrick Gibson. We have film of him hitting left-handed and right-handed, and, a lot of positives with Patrick Gibson. But, that's just where, his dad, I know, Czechoslovakian, Patrick speaks Czech, and but yeah, that attitude of the household. So, that's a guy, that's his dad, and it's like, oh, okay, and I love a guy who can make a comment like that. That's just the way it works out. But if way back when you could turn the clock back, and he's a great tennis player. Vicky Duval's on TV, and so look, and I said, I had told her years ago because of her personality, I said, you really need to study this because you're going to have an opportunity. You could have an opportunity in TV. And, she said, well, I'm working at the UCLA tennis camp. She's also very young, I think 22, 23. And, her story, I used a line today that I learned from her mother, Nadine. It's not a pity party. You're not from a pity city. And, just to be around like Patrick Gibson's mother, or Patrick Gibson's father, Vicky Duval's mom. I mean, I go on and on with many, many stories. Jim Courier. I have never met Jim Courier, although I did a lot of things for his foundation where we would donate time, and like for many years in a row, we would have these group of ladies come over and we would teach them for a week. And then maybe they paid, it was 8 ladies and they paid $500 for the week, and his foundation got $4,000 and we covered it. But, a friend of mine was, very good friends with his mother. I remember giving Nienagle's book to my friend and say, have Linda Courier read this and say if she agrees, if he's an ENFJ. But his sister Audra is Jordan and Danielle, niece and nephew. But Jim Courier, Plant City, I believe it's Plant City, and Dade City, Plant City. Dad listened to Willie Nelson music. People forget that he went to Hopman's And Mr. Hopman just fell in love with the kid and said, you can come anytime you want for free, because he was not a rich kid. And Courier, I just know some little story through his sister. Like, his mother would get him up if he had an 8 o'clock match. His mother would get him up at 4 a.m. At that time, Linda didn't realize that Raisin Bran's a terrible cereal. People think Raisin Bran is healthy, but those little raisins are like a nugget of sugar. But she'd wake him up, have breakfast, because most parents don't understand. Well, your kid's got an 8 o'clock match. What are you going to do? Give him one of those. What are those waffles called? Legos with Eggo waffles. Oh. But when he lost, he cried for 3 days. Talking about Paul Roeder, when Paul Roeder was, this goes back to Ron Woods. Ron Woods told me this. When Ron Woods, not Ron Woods from Texas, Ron Woods from Pennsylvania, he was the first director of player development. And he said, if you had a wheelbarrow of money and you put it on the other side of a brick wall, Pete Sampras would take a couple steps back and go, I'm going to get that money, but how am I going to get there? And Jim Courier would just put his head down and, bulldoze right through the wall. But no, it's all about the attitude of the household. I told a dad today, I said, you're going to come back and eat some more balls. Your kid's 7 years old. You need to do this. You need to take him, put him in the shower, get him something to eat, and then bring him back. And when he starts to play tournaments, when you go to a tournament with your kid, not here in America anymore, because when your kid goes to a tournament in America, they're going to play a 10-point tiebreaker. Your kid goes to a tournament in Europe, and they get a 10-minute break. They get a 10-minute break in the 10s, 12s, 14s, 16s. They don't get a 10-minute break in the 18s. But you take your kid right to the shower. You don't talk to your kid about strategy. If you're going to talk to him about strategy, he's taking a shower, and then you're in and out of that shower in 10 minutes. And but that's where when you give somebody some advice, it really is. We're talking about player development. It takes a long time for the parents to learn the ins and outs, and they think they know a lot about junior tennis, and they're newbies. I would say that my parents, certainly I've proven to be a fool, but my parents had this line. Some kid was the parents were doing such and such, and both my mother and father would say, "Oh my word, the parents, they don't know, but they're making a fool of their kid." And so many times the tail's wagging the dog. It's not backwards; it's completely backwards. And families are smaller; kids get more attention. Gretchen Rush today, I threw in questions as well, and she's the middle child of a family of 5, and she just said siblings. It's such a big part of it, but just in this country, especially, you're from a family of 5 yourself, right?
Yeah, sorry, Steve. I'm the last of 5.
Last of 5. No problem, Anderson. You napping? I put you to sleep, Anderson? You can drink another Mountain Dew.
No, I had a dog come up.
A dog come up.
Not my dog, but he is my dog.
Let's just end by that. Where's that? Just look how dogs are treated now. A kid used to say, I'm in the doghouse. The parents are down on them for doing something wrong. The coaches were down on them. You can't say that anymore. In the doghouse. The way dogs are treated right now, dogs used to actually sleep outside a little house. They had their own little house. They didn't come in the house. But no,
they don't sleep outside here.
I don't know how it happened, but even today, really nice kids, but they don't even know. Kids today in this country in tennis, they don't even know how to address an adult. We need to do a better job and say, this is, John's last name, and this is Mary's last name, and you need to greet them Mr. and Mrs. Doctor. And it's, it's amazing. They just, they won't even go up and talk to, like a new kid comes in, and, no, you need to go greet that new kid. All those lessons, to me, I'll just end by saying this. It's not about tennis. It's not about tennis. Actually, tennis technique is easy. Coming back to your question, what's so difficult about the pro players is they've already heard from A through Z, everybody and their brother. There's so many people that would change their last name to be in one of those boxes at Wimbledon or the U.S. Open. And they're a lot of them are wannabe groupies, and it's look at the TV people. Mark Petchey, the other TV people saying greatest coach. Well, maybe he is, but with Raducanu, for example, there's a person I would love to coach her. She's so close, but she changed the direction. She's changing the direction of the ball. The ball gets up high. She's too close. I really wonder if the players even know they're supposed to lift. And if they don't get set, they got to lift even more. And you do know, Braden would always say is that if you're in a match and you're thinking about technique, you're going to finish second in the field of two. So there's definitely an art of trying to cut down verbiage, get your point across with clarity and brevity. But anyway, we've gone over our limit, Dave. I think that what we could do is touch upon Wimbledon, on the next podcast, and we're getting around to we're getting close to the 5-year mark. Our founder, Andy Fitzell, is going to join us, and we do hope that and it's fine that we have a small audience and compared to the former touring pros that have tennis podcasts now. But I think the whole idea is to do things for free, and can you just help one person?
Well, and it might help if people knew I won the North Dakota Close.
The North Dakota.
Many people considered it the fifth major at the time.
What city was that in?
That was in both Fargo and Grand Forks, depending on the year. But I always thought I was, pretty high up in there until I got to talk to Getz, and then Getz made me feel like a loser. That guy's a stud.
David Getz, previous guest on the podcast. I told this story the other day. Boca Raton, 1970s, true city champion. And it was either 7 or 8 weeks, and you just had to play year-round, during the week. And so you had a wedding to go to, even if, someone unfortunately had a funeral to go to, you could still have a true city champion because everybody wanted to play that. And then from that, they would form a city ladder, and you wanted to play and move up the ladder, and you had to defend before you could challenge. And so many great things have gone away. But
we're starting a ladder again. That'd be another topic for we're kicking one in the fall. Yeah.
And, I guess this could be one comment. The great Ty Tucker, those plastic ladders that parents buy for their kids and they don't use.
Mm-hmm.
He hates those things because, he's got that football mentality, and where that really came from is putting down old truck tires that are really high and thick, and the players had to jump in and out of those. Now, what they do with high level training now is they raise it with ropes. They raise it with strings. So, but the kid who, 1, their parent buys it for them. 2, they never use it. And 3, you don't really have to lift your legs when you're using the plastic ladder. That's a tip for you, Costas. But let's do this. Why don't you say Wimbledon is an amazing tournament. It's fantastic. You love it. But say it all in Greek, and then we'll sign off.
Okay. To Wimbledon, we say Wimbledon.
Yeah, that's good.
Το Wimbledon είναι ένα πολύ ωραίο τουρνουά του τένις. Μου αρέσει πάρα πολύ και μου αρέσει να το παρακολουθώ.
That's Greek to me. It's Greek to me.
Yeah.
Next time we'll have him talk about the serve. But Costas, Phil, and Yvonne, who's still doing all the work behind the scenes, working remotely, and Dave and listeners, thanks. And I hope you got at least one pearl of wisdom, a nugget for your tennis treasure chest. All right. Adios, amigos. Good night.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, bye.